So anyways, welcome, and you're live with Anna at 10 today, Eastern Standard Time, where I try to do a tutorial every week. And I already made this mug over here, which is my newest shape. I've been experimenting with different shapes for on my porcelain mugs. And this is porcelain frost, and it's a pound and 3 ounces. So I'll show you a little closer, or I'm gonna throw another one. And the reason why I wanted to throw with this porcelain frost in particular, so everything that I'm going to be talking about will be on this particular one, Frost by Laguna. And it is because it's the one that I like the most for smaller pieces, but it's also the one that a lot of people have the most problems and issues that comes up are with this type of porcelain. But it is the one that that I think is the prettiest one as far as how white it is and how translucent it is when it is thin. So another one that I suggest for beginners is the standard 365, 365. Hi, Angela. Good morning. So if you're a beginner, I suggest using standard 365 because it's a more forgiving porcelain. I use that also, so I use both. It's not as white as the frost, which is this one here, but it is a more forgiving, so it doesn't crack as easily as this one. It is also translucent, it's just not as white, so I will show you some examples here. But anyways, this one is just one that I just threw, and I'll start another one. So I wanted to have it this shape where it's, and this is not trimmed yet, but I tried to trim more on the bat so it doesn't, it's not like super heavy, but I wanted something that is rounded shape here and then it goes into this curve. So it's just a new shape that I am experimenting. So let's start another one. And I don't know if you guys saw my my video yesterday. It was kind of like unannounced that I was making the genie bottle. And I used up the whole bag. It was the last that I had on the bag for red clay. So then I had to clean my whole wheel, all my tools, because as you guys know, if you leave anything, it can contaminate the porcelain. You don't want that. So it would, any speck or anything will show on porcelain. So it took me quite some time to clean all my tools and everything. So I wish sometimes that's when I wish I had a second wheel. I love this wheel is the VL Whisper Shampoo. And I wedged the clay. Sometimes you don't have to if it is fresh out of the bag, but because this one, I've kept this bag for a while, so it gets a little hard. But this clay is what they call it thixotropic, which is something that feels hard at first, and then once you start wedging or hitting it, it gets softer. So that's the characteristic of this clay. Again, if you're joining me now, it is Frost, Laguna Frost. Not all porcelain clay bodies are the same. So as I was saying, I do recommend if you're a beginner, start with 365. You'll be much You won't get as frustrated as this one can frustrate you and maybe make you give up on porcelain. But with time, then you can switch to this one just because there are so many little issues and you really have to think a lot when you're throwing with this. So one of the things is I learned to throw a little quicker because that way it doesn't absorb as much water. And so I get to about this size here, and then I start opening. And I like to leave enough for making carving a foot or trimming a foot at the bottom. So I'm just opening. And sometimes even if you clean all your tools and everything, sometimes the clay has a little speck of something, and that comes from when it was, manufactured, or not manufactured, but mixed. Sometimes their own clay gets contaminated, and I've learned to live with that. Every now and then you throw something that you expect to be pure white and you see a little speck. Sometimes it can be like a manganese speck. So I like to compress a little bit at the bottom, and then I start pulling. And the way I pull, this little pinky stays here. I hope you can see my fingers here. So this is the position that I squeeze as I'm pulling it. So this thumb is under here, and my fingers are a little bit above. So then I'm pulling the clay and I'm controlling the rim at the same time. Do I add handles to the pots? I do, but do you mean my my mugs or other pots? I do make like some casserole dishes and stuff like that, or trays that I do add little handles. So remember, I'm pulling it. Sometimes you squeeze a little bit of the water so that it gets wet as you're pulling it. And I try to stay in, so you're controlling so it doesn't flare out too much. So did I answer your question about the handles? I do put handles, but not that often. Like when I make bowls that are like serving, like a server, then I add handles. Lately, I've been using a lot of my sculpted birds as handles. You can probably see my feed on Instagram, and you see how I make some casserole dishes with birds, just because I like making birds and other sculpted pieces that I add to my either porcelain or stoneware. So at this point here, I'm still just making a cylinder. And then I start shaping it however you want to shape your mug. If you just want to leave it as a cylinder, it's okay. I still have quite a bit of clay here on the bottom. So with the porcelain, you try not to make too many pulls because the clay will start getting really soft. So right now I decided to just start shaping the way I wanted to shape here, which is it goes out a little here on the bottom. And then kind of curves There's a curve here, like a kind of like a waist, and then it flares out again. And I'll show you some things here that really helps minimize the cracking issue. I'm gonna try to just color this in a little. And you try not to use too much water. That's another thing when throwing with this clay. Just because it does get soft really quick. So here's where I can start shaping even farther by using these metal ribs. So that's something that if you're gonna be throwing with porcelain, start getting used to using these because porcelain doesn't like to have any unevenness of how it dries. So by using the ribs, you're removing the slip from the surface, and that helps making it dry evenly, like inside, outside, the bottom. So I use 2. Sometimes it's better to have 2 of the same. This one might be a little smaller for smaller pieces. These one here, these are pretty good sizes for like bowls, and sometimes I can use like a smaller one inside and a bigger one outside. The idea is if your mug is concave like this, has that curve, you're going to use, so on my case, I'm gonna use it this way because the curve is like that. And this is gonna help making that nice curve right here. This one is tricky because I wanted to have a curve that comes out up to this point, and then from here on, I wanted to go the other way. So what I am gonna do is first I'm just gonna use this rib to make that curve on the bottom here. And that is crucial because, like I said, if you don't do that, that's when you start getting cracks issues. So you see how you're just removing that slip from your piece. Make sure the bottom is dry with your sponge. You sponge. And then, so now I'm going to use the 2 ribs like this. Where the 2 meet. And you keep going up with that until the 2 kind of meet. You're going like this, compressing that wall and removing the slip at the same time. So that takes a little practice using the 2 ribs. You don't want to go completely like this. You can go a little bit on an angle because as the clay is moving, you don't want to be completely at 90 degrees. So you want to go a little bit like this as the clay is rotating. So just practice that. And then if you're not comfortable using the 2 ribs, at least use 1 rib. You can go on the inside first. See, I'm still removing slip. After you go on the inside, just go on the outside and just to remove that. So there is a lot to think about when you're throwing with porcelain. Your brain has to be on the whole time. um, and then I'll show you how I trim a little bit of the bottom as it is here. Wow, it is on the wheel. This clay, I get it from my local supplier, Frost. But you can get it online. Again, it's Laguna is the brand name. If you're here in the US, is readily available on any pottery supplier, your local pottery supplier, or online. So Laguna Frost. So I use a little piece of plastic. You can use what they call it, the chamois, like this, but it gets dry. You can use this for the rim. I like using a piece of plastic. And compressing the rim is important because you're also removing the slip, as you can see here. So you have to remove the slip. Again, I'm talking about this clay in particular. Not all porcelain, you have to do all this. But with this one, because I've used it for so many years, I know that that's what I need to do in order to avoid all the issues. A lot of people give up on this clay because they don't know, and the clay starts to crack as it dries. So that another thing you need to do is dry slowly. So after I'm done here and I put it to dry, I cover. And then as soon as the rim is dry enough that can stand the weight of the clay, I turn it upside down. So that's another thing to avoid those S cracks at the bottom. So I go with the needle. And this is a firmer needle. This one is good. It's a thin needle, but it bends. It's more flexible. This one here is pretty sturdy. And then I just kind of trim until I reach the bottom of the bat. And then, so that I'm removing quite a bit of the clay from the bottom here. Maybe I didn't go all the way on this one. I always save my scraps because I use this for sculpture. You never seen a plastic use on the rim? Yeah, it's a little piece of saran wrap. You know, it's the real thin plastic. And I don't know where I learned that from, but I learned from somebody that I can't think of right now. But what it is the chamois is wet, so it's not dry to take all the slip off the rim. So the saran wrap, when you go, you know, you use a little bit of pressure, you could see all the slip that came off from the rim. So that's another one of my tricks that I use. And so I am trimming. You can trim your piece on the bat, not completely, but you can take quite a bit of the weight while it is on the bat. And what that does is take some of that weight from your piece, and then you can just turn it over upside down. As soon as this one is not sticky anymore, the rim, then I turn it over and let it dry upside down. So trying to think if I forgot to mention anything else for throwing. Again, don't take too long throwing. Try to use the least amount of water that you can. When you pick up your piece. The reason why it doesn't get all wobbly when I pick it up, it doesn't, because it's already a little bit dry, because by using the metal ribs, you're removing that slip, so it firms up. So let me know if you guys have any questions. So let's talk about some of the positives about using porcelain. So this porcelain in particular, because it is so translucent and white, everything looks brighter. Like the glazes that you use look brighter on porcelain. Not to say that if you use white stoneware, it's also good, but you don't know that until you put the two together. I have a little example here. All my mugs that were the sculpted mugs, they're gone to the gallery, so I don't have, these are some older pieces that I have, and you can see how white it is. I don't know if I'll be able to show the difference. So this one is pretty white. This is, what's that called? White Bear by Kentucky Mud Works, this clay. So if I didn't have this one to compare and you look at it, it looks pretty white and bright. So this is an excellent clay that I like to use. So it's not until you put the porcelain that you can see. Another thing that people compare porcelain is the noise that it makes. It has a tone of its own, the ring that it makes, porcelain does. And then I like the glazes look pretty bright when you're using like under glazes to paint. And then it's translucent. So right now I'm contemplating and making some lamps because I like the translucency, and I like using these LED lights that you can put it on the bottom, and you can make a nice night lamp and have it all carved, like relief carved, and that shows through. So there are many pluses for using porcelain. I know a lot of people try not to use it because it is so finicky. Do you hand paint any design on your work? Yes, I do. I do a lot of painting techniques. I do tutorials. Oops. I have classes that I teach on cuerda seca, which is a technique that is mostly used on tiles, but you can use that on mugs and vertical pieces. So I teach workshops on that. And I like also painting with underglazes, so just different techniques. And lately I've been testing some new underglazes for me called Kiwi by Kiwi. I guess that's the brand. And they seem to be much brighter than my other underglazes that I've used. So I just pulled out my bisque pieces from the kiln. So I'll be doing some glazing today. And hopefully in a couple of days, I'll do a kiln review. I just felt a little bubble, and that's frustrating when there is a little air bubble somewhere in the clay and you can feel it. Sometimes those will go away as you are throwing, but those are always just frustrating that you have to poke those air bubbles. And it doesn't matter how much you wedge, sometimes you're always going to end up with, you know, sometimes you get lucky and sometimes you get air bubbles. So hi, Tanner. So I'm going to make a bowl with this one. It would be kind of small because it's the same amount of clay. So it's about, I don't know in grams, but you can convert. It's a pound and 3 ounces that I'm using. Trying to think of the tips that I do here on using this porcelain is you have to have, if you're using a sponge, it has to be, good morning, April. It has to be wet in order to make it flow easily to the top. But not only that, if you're using that, try to make it so that the surface that you're in contact with the porcelain is as small as it can get. So because of the friction on the porcelain, this porcelain, it is a little sticky, I would say, how I would describe it. So try to go, let's say if you're just using your finger, instead of using, you know, like a big part of some people use your knuckle. I don't do that because then you're using there's a lot of friction. If I'm using the sponge, I try to make it like I fold it. So I'm just using a little tip of the sponge to move the clay up. And at the same time, I'm squeezing a little water so that it's not dragging. Trying to see what else I can say about this. Trying to be in control of my the rim at the same time, because if not, sometimes it gets all wobbly. And I'm gonna try to do one more pull because I feel that I still have a lot of clay on the bottom. Again, I don't use this clay for bigger pieces. I have tried and I didn't like. I do, if I'm making a large platter, I use the standard 365. It's much better. I guess it is because, let me see. If I am filming on a mirror image, yeah, I guess so. I think I should have changed it, right? Are there any particular challenges when trying to carve with frost? No, I think frost is pretty good for carving. And so is the other one that I mentioned. The 365 is also a good clay for carving. So here again, This is kind of like a small bowl, but because it is like this, I'm going to pick this shape. And then if you're throwing something and you notice that it's getting wobbly, use the ribs. It will stand up right away. That's another thing. As soon as I see my pieces, if it's starting to get too soft, I pick up my rib and I start removing the slip, and you see that it just stands up right up, and if it gets like firmer. So you see all the slip that comes up. Now be careful with these ribs. They sell them on Amazon, or you can buy from anywhere from your pottery supplier. I will put the link of a whole set that I buy from Amazon. But these are dangerous. They call the ribs of death. If you ever heard of that term, but that's why, because a lot of people cut themselves using this. Um, Again, if you're not that comfortable using the ribs, you can always use one and then go with the other on the outside, but do remove the slip. And I like to have the bowl having a nice curve, and these are great for that, because you see how it has that nice curve there. So I take that all the way down to the bottom of my bowl. And I still have a little water on the bottom here. Make sure you dry that with your sponge. So those are my tricks for using porcelain, is trying to keep everything even. When you trim, you want to make sure that you don't have a whole lot of clay on the bottom, that your walls are even. Then the same thing on the bottom. I trim the bottom, I have a foot, so I make sure that my bottom is pretty close to the wall thickness, so that you won't have that cracking issue, because that's why that happens is the first is the unevenness of dryness. If your bottom is too thick and your walls are thin, that means your bottom is going to stay wet longer than your walls, right? So, and that's going to cause cracking. And then make sure that your walls are even. So see how there's slip that comes off from the rim? Yeah, I think with the mirror, it looks like I am left. Oh no, it does look like I'm throwing with my right hand. Yeah, sometimes I reverse that so that people can read. If I'm wearing something that has like AnasClayHouse, or that I want people to read, I will make sure it's probably the other way. So now I'm just gonna do a little trimming here. Since my bottom here is pretty small, I'm just gonna take a little bit, because with the bowl, since it's flares out, you don't wanna take too much, because that's the support right now, because it is still on the soft stage. With the mug, I can get away by taking some of that excess clay, because it doesn't flare out like the bowl does. So I'm just gonna, take some, but not a whole lot. These are pretty good tools to have. These are Dolan tools, which I think they went out of business, but I think they still carry their tools. It has the angle here. And then I also have this one, which is just comes to a point. It's also a Dolan, yeah, tools. I think my local pottery supplier, they do carry them. So, but it's been a while since I heard that they were no longer making it. So I don't know if there is another company that took over for Dolan tools, because I used to really like them. So I should still be able to pick that up. Just make sure your hands are clean, right? Your hands are dry. I should be able to just put that here. So as soon as like I mentioned before, as soon as the rim starts to get a little stiffer, I turn my pieces upside down. So that the bottom is up. So those are easy to throw with frost. Like I said, if I was gonna do a bigger, I think I can do maybe like a 5-pound bowl with frost, but definitely not a 10 pounds. Then even with all my tips and stuff, you get cracking. I know that because I've tested. I've tested it out. I made a real large kind of open form, the ones that I like to make, which I stretch the clay and I make it an open bowl. So this one was, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 inches across. And I carved inside, but I got cracks on the bottom. It's really hard to do something large using this clay. So I've managed to make smaller pieces like mugs and bowls, smaller bowls. Like I said, maybe up to 5 pounds, but not those huge ones. Now, I do use the 365 with no problem. No cracks. Just gonna make another mug. So these mugs, if you guys want to see, I am going to be sculpting them. Like when I say sculpting the mugs, I use my sculptures and I attach to the mug. So if you guys want to see some videos, I can post some videos of that. But that's what these are going to be. My chameleon mugs were pretty popular. Hi, Mrs. G. So I am going to make more chameleons as people are requesting. Not requesting, I don't do custom orders, but I do take suggestions. And if it is something that I already make, and I know that there is a lot of interest for something, like my animal mugs, some creatures like frogs, I do take suggestions. So sometimes people will email me and ask if I take custom orders, and I always say, sorry, I don't, but I do take suggestions. And if it is something I'm familiar with that I already make, then why not? You see how even throwing has all that slip that comes out? This one is starting to flare out a little bit, so I'm going to bring it in a little. Again, I try to leave a little bit over a quarter of an inch on the bottom, so I have, I can trim a foot. So at this point, I'm going to start shaping the mug. If you didn't see what I did with the other one that I threw prior to the bowl, I am experimenting with a new shape. So what I want to do is make it a little bit, that bottom to be really rounded out, and then I'll come in again and go the other way. So this part goes out, and then this one starts to go in. Always remove the water from the bottom. I'm just talking over what I usually do because it's so many steps that you do it when you're so used to, you do it automatically. So I'm trying to say it out loud so you guys can just know what I'm doing, because since you can't see like the inside. Adrian, can coffee be put in the mugs for drinking? Yes. Yeah, everything that I make, it's all functional. Even my sculpted mugs, I make everything hollow, so it's not like real heavy. And everything I make can go in the dishwasher and microwave safe. I do recommend hand washing just because it's safer. But everything that I make, yes, it is functional, can go microwave safe, even the sculpted mugs. Adrian, got lots of great comments on my chameleon mug. Yeah? Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, that was an awesome mug you made. And I didn't know people are just crazy about the chameleons. I've been getting a lot of requests, so I am going to be making different chameleons now. I like making the colorful. I always pick colorful things to make just because I end up hand painting them. And I like color, so that's why I picked the Panther Chameleon. But I had someone suggested to me some other ones that I had never even seen before. So I am going to make some real different ones now. So here I did the bottom part that I wanted to be rounded shape. And now I'm going to do the two together in here. Always remember to see the shape of your mug. So if this one has a curve, make sure it's going this way. Following, there's a little bit of a curve here and the curve here. If you're going the other way to make it round this way, you're going to use it this way, the ribs. So always have to think about that. So now, oh, I think I had the smaller one inside, so. And they're meeting each other. So remove all that slip. Again, if you're not used to using two ribs, use one, then the other. And you can use the chamois like this. You can use that for the rim. I like using the plastic just because I feel that I remove more of that slip from the rim. Anything to avoid those surface cracks. So surface cracks is something that I mentioned yesterday on my video. It's something that is very shallow, and it's just annoying to see if you use a nice translucent glaze like a celadon. It's very annoying when you see that through your glaze. Even though it has nothing to do with your glaze, your piece is still functional. Chances are those cracks will never go to all the way through, but you see them, and they are usually about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch wide. So they're very small, but they show up everywhere. And that is when the inside of your piece is not as dry, or it's not the same dryness as the outside wall. So I'll tell you a little quick story here that happened to me, and that's how I found out. So uh, way back, I was giving a tutorial. I was making a live video, and I was showing how to carve a piece. So what I did is I put plastic. The piece was almost leather hard. So what I did is I put plastic inside, to thinking that is so you would keep from drying too fast. And so during the video, I am carving, and I noticed that the piece, because I was outside in my house, and I love to work outdoors. So as I am holding the piece and I'm carving away, I can start seeing that the piece is just drying quicker, but not on the inside, because I had the plastic thinking that it was going to be even. So what happened is, during the carving, I started seeing the little cracks showing up. And that was because the plastic was keeping the moisture inside, and on the outside it was drying because it was on the open air. So right then I realized that what was happening, and so that's why it's important to keep it covered, and that helps to make it, even the way it dries. It gives time to dry even, and then uh, putting it upside down will avoid the cracks on the bottom. Um, is this the same process how China ware was made? No, I believe China is a different process, because from what I understand, the real thin China, um, that I have some cups, they're China, they're very, very thin. That clay is not, at least it didn't used to be. They might be able to mix something with that makes it for you to be able to throw on the wheel. But I believe those were not wheel thrown. Some might be, but from what I did some research on porcelain, those are different. Um, what I want to say, different materials on that clay. And that's why they can go so thin. Now you can achieve that on a wheel thrown porcelain like this one. Like right now, I think I throw to an eighth of an inch. And then when I carve, you go even thinner. And that's when you start really getting translucency when it's thin. But yeah, I think they might mix something with that clay to be able to throw on the wheel. And it's also different than a cone 10 porcelain, which some people say cone 10 is the real porcelain, but not the cone 6. What I use is cone 6, but it is porcelain. It just doesn't go to that high of, the firing. It's not. My kiln doesn't even go to a cone 10. It goes to like a cone 8. So that's all I can handle. So you see, once I trim this piece, so I turn it upside down before I trim, but I try to take as much as I can from the bottom, the excess. So, and I think that's it. If you guys don't have any more questions, I hope this was helpful. This will be available because once I stop, it starts uploading the video. So it takes almost a day to complete the upload, so you can rewatch it. Let me know if you have any more questions. I'll be happy to answer any questions. So thanks for watching, and feel free to leave me any comments. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for being here, guys. Bye-bye. Thanks, Adrian. Bye.